My mom didn't wait for me to finish my last rep. She stood at the entrance of my gym, arms folded, watching my hands shake on the bar. Sweat rolled into my eyes, my lungs burning, my heart pounding too hard for such a simple lift. "Still pretending you're strong," she said, loud enough for the man behind me to hear. I lowered the weight, my arms buzzing like dead wires, my throat dry. She smiled the same small smile she used when sold my sick dad's car without asking him. My chest wasn't tight from effort. It was tight because she had come here only to remind me who she thought I was. My name is Evan Miller. I was 29, living in a rented one-room apartment above a discount hardware store in a quiet town called Ridgeway. I had always been quiet, the kind of person my mom said was too soft to survive in this family. I worked as a night desk clerk at a roadside motel where people forgot my face as soon as they checked out. Every morning started with my body arguing with gravity. My knees felt thick and swollen when I rolled off the mattress on the floor. My shoulders carried a dull ache from the gym that never really went away. The fridge coughed like it was sick too, and I would stand there waiting for coffee to finish dripping, staring at the cracked wall like it had answers. The town woke up slowly. Delivery trucks growled past my window. Someone always slammed the metal door downstairs. My phone stayed silent most days, and I pretended I didn't care, but the quiet wrapped around my chest until it felt hard to breathe. Once a week I drove to my mom's house to check on Dad. Her place always smelled like Lehman cleaner, and something cold that had been left out too long. I would knock even though I still had a key, because I didn't feel welcome using it anymore. My sister usually sat at the kitchen table with her laptop, laughing at something Mom whispered to her. They spoke in a soft tone that stopped the second I entered the room. "You're early," Mom would say without looking at me, as if my timing was always wrong. I'd mumble sorry and slip down the hallway toward Dad's room. My stomach always knotted there. His door stayed half open, like he might be able to hear the house if he tried hard enough. He lay thin and pale, hands folded over his stomach, the blanket pulled up higher than it needed to be. I would pull a chair close and sit with my knees touching the bed, because standing felt disrespectful somehow. His eyes followed me like he was trying to remember who I was before his body started betraying him. One morning, as I was walking down the hallway, I heard Mom say to my sister, "At least you turned out normal." My sister laughed. I stopped with my palm against the wall because the floor suddenly felt too far away. The words weren't meant for me, but they landed in my chest like something sharp. I waited for Mom to notice me, but she didn't. The kitchen kept breathing without me, and I walked back out the front door feeling like the house had already decided I wasn't part of it anymore. At the motel, I stood behind the counter for hours, smiling when people demanded new towels, nodding when they complained about the smell of the carpets. My back hurt from standing still. My feet burned inside cheap shoes, and I kept flexing my fingers to stop the numbness. Every shift ended the same way. I drove home in the dark, my muscles stiff, my jaw locked. I passed the high school football field, where I used to watch from the bleachers because I was too weak to try out. The lights were always off now, but I could still see my reflection in the glass, shoulders slumped, eyes tired. That was my life before everything finally broke open, and I had no idea how much of it had already been taken from me. When Dad first got sick, Mom told everyone it was nothing serious. She said it while smiling, like her face could fix what doctors couldn't. I believed her because believing her was easier than watching my father disappear in front of me. I was the one who drove him to appointments. The waiting rooms smelled like old paper and cleaning spray, and the chairs were always cold through my jeans. I would sit there holding his coat while he talked to nurses, my legs bouncing because I never knew what questions to ask. Mom never came. She was always busy with work or errands or friends whose names changed too often. The first time something felt wrong was when I went back to my old bedroom to get Dad's tax folder. It was always in the bottom drawer, labeled in his neat block letters. Instead, I found a stack of bank envelopes with Mom's name printed larger than his. The numbers were different too. Bigger. I carried one into the kitchen. My hands were shaking, but I tried to keep my voice steady. "Why is your name first on Dad's account now?" She barely looked up from her phone. "He wanted me to handle things. You wouldn't understand this stuff anyway." The words stung more than the answer. You wouldn't understand. like I was still a child who couldn't be trusted with anything sharp or important. I nodded and put the envelope back, but the inside of my chest stayed tight the rest of the day. The second moment came a few months later. At a family dinner Dad was too weak to attend. Mom had cooked his favorite meal, then left his chair empty at the table. "I've been seeing someone," she said as casually as if she were announcing a new brand of coffee. My sister clapped her hands. Finally. I stared at my plate, the food turning heavy in my stomach. "He's very supportive," Mom added, this time looking straight at me. "Not like some people." Her boyfriend arrived halfway through the meal. He shook my hand too hard and called me sport. When he sat down, he picked up Dad's fork and slid it closer to Mom's plate, like he had already replaced him. That night I sat in my car long after everyone else had gone inside. My hands were locked around the steering wheel, my knuckles pale. I felt sick, not just in my stomach, but all the way down to my bones. A few weeks later, Mom cornered me in the hallway as I was taking off my shoes. "You need to start thinking about your own place," she said, straightening a picture frame I hadn't touched. "What?" My voice came out thin. "You're almost 30, it's embarrassing." She finally looked at me then, her eyes flat. "You've been a burden long enough?" I opened my mouth, but no words came. My ears rang and the house felt too quiet. Dad was asleep in his room, and I stood there thinking about how he had once carried me on his shoulders at the county fair because my legs were too tired to walk. I packed that night. Not neatly. Just clothes shoved into trash bags because it felt wrong to take anything else. As I stepped out the door, I waited for her to call me back, to say something human. She didn't. I didn't know it then, but that hallway was the last place I would ever feel like her son. And the reason she pushed me out was still waiting for me to uncover. The letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, wedged between pizza coupons and overdue notices at the motel desk. My mom's handwriting was thin and slanted across the envelope like it didn't want to be read. Inside was a single page. There had been recent adjustments to my father's estate. I was invited to a meeting to clarify my role going forward. The words were clean, almost polite. They made my skin crawl. I folded the letter into my pocket and finished my shift on autopilot. A woman complained that her room smelled like smoke. A kid spilled soda in the lobby. I kept nodding, smiling, while the paper burned a hole in my thigh. That night, I sat on the edge of my mattress with the letter in my hands, my pulse loud in my ears. My body felt hollow, like something important had been removed and I hadn't been told. The meeting was 3 days later in my mom's living room. Her boyfriend sat beside her, one arm stretched across the back of the couch like he owned the place. My sister was there too, holding a clipboard, acting like this was some kind of business deal. Mom didn't waste time. "You won't be receiving anything from your father's estate," she said, flipping open a folder. "We've decided this is the most practical solution." The room tilted. I stared at the pattern in the rug until it steadied. "I've been helping Dad since he got sick," I said. My mouth was dry. "I've paid bills. I've driven him everywhere." "That was your choice," she replied. "This is ours." My hands started to sweat. I wiped them on my jeans and tried to keep my voice from cracking. "He doesn't even know about this." She finally looked at me then, her expression bored. "He doesn't need to. He trusts me." Her boyfriend shifted, clearing his throat. My sister avoided my eyes. The pressure in my chest built until it felt like I was breathing through cloth. I wanted to shout, to knock everything off the table. But all I did was nod because I was still that quiet son standing in hallways waiting to be noticed. When I left, my legs felt numb. I sat in my car with the engine off, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face looked smaller than I remembered. I didn't go home. I drove straight to the cheapest gym in town. The place smelled like metal and old sweat. The lights buzzed overhead. I wrapped my hands in tape even though I didn't know how, the edges crooked and loose. The first bar I tried to lift didn't move. Heat rushed into my ears. A man nearby glanced over, then looked away. I tried again, my arms shaking so hard I thought they might give out. The weight finally rose an inch, then slammed back down. I leaned forward, hands on my knees, my lungs burning, my stomach rolling. I felt weak in a way that had nothing to do with muscle. But I stayed. I stayed until the staff flipped the lights to warn everyone they were closing. I walked out into the cold with my arms buzzing, my fingers stiff, my jaw locked tight. At home, I lay on the mattress staring at the ceiling. every part of me aching. The words from the meeting replayed over and over, each time cutting a little deeper. He doesn't need to know. That sentence settled into my chest like a stone. And that was the night something inside me finally stopped begging. Sleep didn't come anymore. When it did, it never stayed long. I would wake with my heart racing like I had been running, my shirt damp with sweat, my mouth dry and sour. The ceiling above my mattress seemed too close, like it was slowly lowering every night. I started pacing the room until my calves cramped. My knees felt thick and stiff from the gym, and my shoulders carried a constant dull burn that no stretch could reach. Sometimes I pressed my palms against my ribs, just to feel my heart working, proof that something in me was still alive. At work I made mistakes. I handed out the wrong room keys. I forgot to restock towels. My manager pulled me aside one night and asked if everything was okay. I lied and said I was just tired, even though tired didn't begin to cover it. Every shift ended the same way. I drove to the gym with my jaw clenched, the steering wheel slick in my hands. The moment I stepped inside, the noise took over, metal clanking, someone breathing too loud, the faint hum of old machines. My body complained with every movement. My wrists throbbed. My lower back sent sharp reminders when I bent down. I watched men lift weights I couldn't imagine touching. I copied their motions, slowly, carefully, feeling muscles I didn't know I had wake up and protest. My arms would start to shake halfway through a set, and I'd have to stop, my vision blurring at the edges. In the locker room, I leaned my forehead against the cold tile and closed my eyes. My breath came in short bursts. My reflection in the mirror looked wrong, ribs too visible. Shoulders slumped forward like I was trying to disappear. On the worst nights, memories pushed in when I finally lay down. Mom's voice in the hallway. "You're a burden." Her bored eyes in the living room. "He doesn't need to know." Dad's thin hands resting uselessly on his blanket. I started writing things down in a cheap spiral notebook. Dates. Times. Little details I had brushed past before. The smell of lemon cleaner in the house. The way Mom had avoided my eyes when I asked about the bank envelope. How the shop had suddenly closed without any warning. One night I found an old folder in a box almost thrown away. Inside was a handwritten note from Dad, dated years earlier. "Evan gets the shop if anything happens to me." My fingers went numb holding that piece of paper. The shop was already gone, sold without a word. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, the notebook sliding out of my hands, my chest hurting in a way I couldn't stretch away. I tried to talk to Dad about it a few days later. I sat beside his bed, my legs trembling, the folder resting on my lap. "Did you ever change your will?" I asked quietly. He frowned, lines deepening on his forehead. "No," he said after a moment. "Why?" The room swayed. I felt sick, my mouth filling with a bitter taste. I went to the bathroom and retched into the sink, my whole body folding in on itself. When I straightened, my face in the mirror was pale, my eyes too bright. That night, I wrote one sentence across the top of a fresh page in the notebook, pressing the pen so hard it almost tore through. I wasn't going to beg anymore. The words looked strange and solid, like they belonged to someone braver than me. But I circled them anyway, and for teeth the first thing I did was stop talking to my mom about anything that mattered. I still went to see Dad, still nodded when she made empty comments about the weather, but I kept my questions locked inside my chest. My hands shook less that way. I started with bank records. I didn't even know where to begin, so I walked into a branch Dad had used for years and stood in line with my palms damp, rehearsing what I would say. When I finally reached the counter, my voice came out thin. "My father is ill," I said. "I need copies of old statements. Just for my records." The teller frowned at her screen. "Your mother is the primary holder now." The word now scraped against my ears. I left with nothing but a headache and a growing sense that every door had been quietly locked before I even thought to try the handle. Next, I emailed the lawyer who had helped Dad with his will years earlier. I wrote the message 3 times before I sent it, deleting anything that sounded like begging. The reply came 2 days later, short and stiff, telling me there had been revisions and that only my mother was authorized to access them. I sat on my bed staring at the screen, my legs bouncing, my jaw aching from being clenched all day. For a moment I considered giving up. The gym had made my body stronger, but my chest still felt weak in the places that mattered. Instead, I drove to the county records office. The building was old, the chairs hard plastic that bit into the backs of my thighs. I waited behind people arguing about property lines and missing deeds. My lower back throbbed. My fingers went numb from gripping my number slip. When it was finally my turn, I asked for records under my father's name. The clerk printed a thick stack of papers and slid them across the counter. I flipped through them in my car with the windows cracked open because the air inside felt stale. One document made my stomach drop. The shop sold. Signed by my mother. Dated 2 weeks after Dad had been admitted to the hospital. My chest tightened, not sharply, but like something heavy had been laid across it. I sat there until my legs cramped, staring at the signature I had seen my whole life, now looking like a stranger's. That night I tried to show the papers to Dad. I pulled a chair close to his bed, my hands trembling so badly I had to set the folder down. "Mom said you wanted this," I said quietly. He stared at the page for a long time. Then he shook his head. "I don't remember signing anything like this." The words landed slow and heavy. I excused myself and went to the bathroom, closing the door softly because I didn't want him to hear the sound I was about to make. I bent over the sink and gagged, my throat burning, my eyes watering. My knees almost gave out. When I straightened, my reflection looked older, like the weight of those papers had pressed lines into my face. The setback didn't come from my mom. It came from me. For days afterward, I couldn't focus. I missed lifts at the gym. My grip slipped. My wrist screamed with pain. I dropped a stack of clean towels at work and just stood there while guests stepped around me. One night, I sat in my car outside my apartment with the engine running, the folder on the passenger seat. I told myself I could throw it away. I could forget everything and let life keep shrinking the way it had been. My hands hovered over the papers. Instead, I picked them up. And that was when I knew I was too far in to turn back, even though I had no idea how much it was going to cost me. The first time in months, I felt the start of a plan forming, even though I had no idea where it would lead. I didn't confront my mom right away. I needed to understand everything first, because every time I thought about her sitting across from me in that living room, my chest tightened until my breath came shallow. I spread the documents across my kitchen floor. The room smelled like rubber mats and stale coffee. My legs were sore from training, and kneeling made my knees throb. But I kept moving the papers around, building a story out of dates and signatures. The sale of the shop, the changes to the accounts, the doctor's report stating Dad had been sedated on the same day my mom claimed he had signed the transfer. The more I lined up, the less room there was for doubt. I invited my sister over under the excuse of dinner. My hands shook while I cooked, the pan handle slick with sweat. When she arrived, she hugged me like nothing was wrong, then stopped when she saw the papers covering the table. "What's this?" she asked. I slid the shop transfer toward her. "Look at the date." She read in silence, her lips pressing together. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. "Did Mom show you any of this?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. "No." I watched something change in her face, something I hadn't seen since we were kids and Dad would catch us lying. The room felt heavier, the air thick. Later that evening, we went to Mom's house together. I stood in the doorway, while my sister laid the documents across the living room table. My mom's boyfriend sat beside her, one arm stretched across the couch like always. The clock on the wall ticked loud enough to make my jaw ache. "What is this?" Mom asked, frowning. My sister didn't answer. She slid the doctor's note forward. Mom read in silence. Her fingers moved slower with each page, like they were wading through mud. Her boyfriend shifted, cleared his throat, then stopped when she raised a hand. The room held its breath. Finally, Mom set the papers down. She didn't look at me. She stared at the carpet. "This is a misunderstanding," she said. My sister pushed the bank statement closer. "It's dated, and this one has your signature." Mom's mouth opened, then closed. She picked up the page again, as if seeing it for the first time might change something. We heard movement down the hallway. Dad appeared in the doorway, supported by a nurse. His steps were small, careful, and each one felt like it was echoing inside my ribs. "What's going on?" he asked. Mom didn't answer. My sister stood up and guided him to the chair. I stayed by the wall because my legs didn't trust me to hold my weight. Dad looked at the table, then at Mom. "Did you sell the shop?" he asked, his voice thin but steady. The silence stretched. Mom's shoulders sank a fraction, just enough for me to notice. Her eyes dropped to her lap. "I was trying to protect us," she said finally, so quietly I almost missed it. I didn't feel anger then. I felt tired, like my bones had been carrying this moment for years and were finally setting it down. No one shouted. No one cried. The truth just sat there between us, plain and ugly. And in that quiet, I realized she had nothing left to say. The weeks after the exposure were quiet, almost too quiet. No yelling, no demands, just careful conversations and lawyers' letters confirming the corrected accounts. Dad regained some control over his finances. The shop couldn't be returned, but the money was restored to where it belonged. Mom stopped calling. Her absence felt strange at first, like a missing shadow, but it wasn't painful, just neutral. I opened the gym a few weeks later with my friend from the motel, someone who had seen me train night after night, dragging myself through sweat and exhaustion. The morning air was cold and sharp as I turned the key in the lock. Inside, the place smelled of new paint and rubber mats. The machines gleamed under the fluorescent lights. My body ached in a good way, a way that reminded me I had built this for myself, not to prove anything to anyone else. The first clients were regulars from the old neighborhood. They looked at me with a mix of curiosity and respect. Not because of my size, but because of my consistency. I showed them proper form, kept an eye on their posture, corrected their breathing. I reminded them that progress was earned in quiet moments, sweat-stained nights, and empty gyms when no one was watching. Sometimes, in the early hours before anyone arrived, I caught my reflection in the mirrors lining the walls. My shoulders were broader, my posture straighter. My eyes weren't cast downward anymore. And yet, I still thought about Mom sitting alone in that living room, staring at the papers. Not in anger, but in quiet disbelief. I stopped imagining her words, the sneers, the way she had made me feel small. I didn't need that weight anymore. My focus was on the clients, on the machines, on the rhythm of breath and movement. Dad came in once, leaning on a cane, a small smile touching his lips. He watched for a few minutes, then nodded. The approval meant more than any confrontation ever could. Even on days when memories came, when I remembered the hallway where she had kicked me out, or the empty chair at dinner, I felt a strange kind of peace. I had faced the betrayal, I had gathered the proof, and I had rebuilt my life in ways she could not touch. The revenge wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was in the life I refused to let her take from me. And each night, when I locked the doors and turned off the lights, I felt that ache in my muscles and joints, the kind that spoke of effort, endurance, and survival. An ache was mine. It reminded me that I had weathered her betrayal, endured the setbacks, and still stood strong. Strong enough to carry the life I wanted, strong enough to leave the past behind. People think revenge is loud. They imagine shouting, slamming doors, and dramatic confrontations. But for me, it came in quiet moments, in stiff joints and sleepless nights, in tracing signatures on papers that shouldn't have been changed. It came in the slow work of proving the truth, without letting anger dictate my every step. I didn't need to yell at my mother to feel victorious. I didn't need her to crumble in tears to feel justified. The real victory was in rebuilding myself, in regaining the strength she had once mocked, in creating something she couldn't touch. My gym wasn't just a place to lift weights, it was a statement that my life was mine, shaped by effort, persistence, and quiet resolve. Dignity isn't something you take back from someone else. It's something you carry forward. I carry it in the way I train, the way I treat others, and the way I walk into the world without shrinking from shadows in my past. I carry it in Dad's small, approving nods and in the rhythm of my own heartbeat that I've learned to trust again. And every time I close the doors at night, turn off the lights, and feel the ache in my muscles, I remember that I was almost tempted to beg, to shrink into the shape she wanted me to be. I didn't. I stayed. I rebuilt. I survived. The past isn't gone, but it doesn't hold me hostage anymore. It exists as a reminder that betrayal can hurt, but it cannot define the person willing to endure, to act, and to rise. Strength isn't in taking someone down, it's in standing tall when the world has tried to make you small. And that is a lesson no one, no matter how cruel, can ever steal from me. I am Evan Miller. I am quiet, yes, but I am not weak. I am strong, and I am finally free.